Archetypes are like these building blocks. They're these basic ideas of could be basic idea of anything that comes from a trend that we see in our real world or in movies. It's like a stereotype of a person, but less racist and a little more general. But they're necessary so that people have sort of like these basic ideas of what things are. We learn them as a child. Like say there's a show about a school, and some archetypes would be like the nerd, the jock, the popular girl, you know? The school, quiet kid, things like that. But there's also fictional things that also have these archetypes. Like there's the wizard, and then there's the chosen one, and there's the warrior, and then there's like the priest or medic, whatever you call it. And then there's the thief or the rogue, and then that's your like fantasy team. And archetypes can be basic, but what really matters is the coat of paint that you put on it. Archetypes are not meant to just be eaten plain. Depending on who is making them, who's making the character or the world, they'll have a nice and different seasoning about it. And we're going to talk about that today in this video. So subscribe depending on how many subscribers I have right now and whatever. And subscribe as well. Don't have many right now. Comment what your favorite trope is. Enjoy the video. I forgot to mention that there are also stereotypes or archetypes of environments and settings. I love it when the fantasy world has a big tree in the middle. That happens a lot in a lot of fantasy worlds. Happens in Dragon Quest, happens in whatever Yggdrasil is from. I think it stems from like myth or something. But back to these characters. The way these archetypes work so well is the way that they bounce off of each other. It's kind of like how everybody agrees that the number 0 means nothing. It's like a baseline for character building. The aspiration is not to be finished, to get an archetype and then just be finished with it, but it gives you, if you're still starting out your story, it gives you this basic idea of how a character should be. And these archetypes can be really helpful for communicating your idea to someone. So a good way that two archetypes work against each other, is the master and the apprentice. Or the main character doesn't really know much, and then the guy who teaches him trope. This is seen in like a lot of things, like Karate Kid, you could say Training Day. Archetypes can also be flipped on their head when, there's certain expectations when you say I have a character that's like a police cadet, but we get more specific as we keep on digging. What type of master, what type of trainer? Oh, it's a police cadet. And then what if the police is a bad guy? But these are all generalizations. Bad guy and a good guy. These are just basic names, and that's why they're so useful to convey ideas if you're like pitching an idea to someone. So you start with the basic idea of police cadet training another police cadet. He basically rules the neighborhood on the street level through fear. But in the end, these archetypes are ideas. So when you keep on mixing these ideas of, you think a police cadet should be a good guy, a good, sort of like a nice person, but then you twist it and make him evil, and sort of like there's conflict of ideas. Like as a human being, we expect the police to be like good. Alright, this might be controversial, like present day, but like, you know what I mean. But we have the idea of a police officer and an idea of a bad person, like an evil person, and this combination of archetypes or ideas is what makes characters interesting. It's not the only thing that makes them interesting, don't get me wrong, but it's a big part of it. When Vince Gilligan, the creator of Breaking Bad, proposed the idea of Walter White, he says that throughout the entire series, we want to turn Mr. Chips into Scarface. Now, if you're like me, you don't even know who Mr. Chips is. But turning Mr. Chips to Scarface, I know who Scarface is. And just the idea of Scarface, of a guy named Scarface, you get the idea, he's supposed to be a bad guy. That part was easy, but Mr. Chips? Come on, this dude's lame. Anyways, he proposed the idea of Mr. Chips turns into Scarface. If you have an idea of Mr. Chips, then you know that they're definitely not Scarface. And you have an idea of Scarface, and you have the idea that they're definitely not Mr. Chips. And even if you don't know them both, then the idea of someone named Mr. Chips and named Scarface, two very contrasting ideals. Alright, I'll stop talking about Mr. Chips now. So now that we've settled that archetypes come from our own ideas of things. Things, people, places, they can be used as building blocks. What do you do with those blocks after you're done building? Well, you're actually not done building, because just saying someone's a nerd is not enough. There are the individual character details. For example, a good example of this is The Breakfast Club, where every single character seems to be a stereotype of one of these character ideas. In fact, I think I just named all of them at the beginning of this video. The Breakfast Club starts with these characters, these archetypes these stereotypes, and you just assume that they are how they are just because they are. But slowly we get to find out why they are how they are. You sort of learn about them backwards. It's kind of like seeing a character and seeing a flashback of who they were. It gives you a perspective of how they are now. Like the jock, for example, Brian in this movie. He doesn't even like to do wrestling. He just does it because his dad tells him. Or Andrew, I mean. Brian's the nerd guy. Or how Brian, the nerd, is under pressure to be a people pleaser. He does everybody's homework in the Breakfast Club because he wants them to like him. And he thinks that's the only reason that they'll like him. As you know, in the Breakfast Club, they're all in detention for different reasons, but reasons that fit their archetypes. The bad boy pulled the fire alarm, the princess ditched school to go shopping, the jock taped a nerd's butt together, and one of the nerd's devices broke and went off, and he got in trouble for it. And then the weirdo, the weird kid, the quiet kid, whatever you want to say, is just there because she feels like it. These really interesting characters, like Neo from the Matrix. Like at first he's like, well, I'm the one, I'm the chosen one, and then he finds out that he's actually not. And then by overcoming the Matrix, he then becomes the one. And it suits the theme of the Matrix as well. Like you can become a better person. You're not it's saying that you're not the one right now, but you can become the one if you break out of the Matrix. And another big explosion of tropes being reversed is what if the superhero was bad and started, blood and everything? What if the superhero swore? Because most big superhero things at the time are, child friendly. They're marketed towards children, but in a half sense, more or less. But things like Invincible and Homelander and Omni-Man are twisting this thing up. And in Variables, we get better characters from this, and the list goes on and on. And the more in the genre that people expect a specific thing from, the more easy it could be, the more thrilling it would be if you were to shake it up. Like how Dune, unlike most sci-fi things, it doesn't really have a blue filter all over it the entire time. It just doesn't look like, or even sound like in the book, any regular sci-fi thing. It's far out there, I guess. It's not just like some guy covered in... Okay, I'm gonna stop there. But, you get the idea. And finally, Walter White. It's like, and Vince Gilligan's characters. Oh, like the lawyer, the criminal lawyer, Saul Goodman, who gets people out of jail by committing crimes, by making them fake injuries, fake anything, really. Fake evidence, anything. And he plays the legal system. And in that way, it's like a commentary on legality. The entire show is a play on legality. And how the line between being a criminal and a lawyer or being a good person or a bad person isn't really that set in stone. Or sometimes the trope, again, isn't even the character or the environment, but it's what unexpectedly happens to the character. Like how in The Walking Dead, Rick Grimes, he gets shot and he gets hospitalized, and the zombie apocalypse happens while he's in a coma, and then he wakes up and there's zombies everywhere, but his best friend Shane has been pricking his wife, has been screwing his wife while he's gone, and he returns, and it shakes things up. And also, Shane's Rick's best friend. Don't worry, this is the first episode. Chill out. It's no spoiler. And it makes him put some pressure on everyone. And also, Rick doesn't even really know for a long time. Doesn't even really know about this. At least up to the point where I've watched. And I promise this is the last example. And it's these conflicted characters, morality-wise, literally anything-wise. Just an encouraging plot or a really good plot or something like that. Or an interesting chain of events, interesting or an unfortunate turn of events. It just works. It's very gripping. What if Thanos snapped half of the world, but then he actually ended up doing it? What if the superheroes lost? That's why Infinity War shook things up so much, because people weren't actually expecting the Avengers to lose. And then they did. Also, on a grimmer note, the Mr. Chips shop in New York is permanently closed in Brooklyn.